I'm in Cincinnati. You know, I was in Canada, hectic interviews, and I finally arrived in Cincinnati. And guess what? I get an invitation to see Liverpool play Fulham. Now, you've got to remember that Fulham just got back in the EPL. And one of the gentlemen there, who also sponsored my beer, is Kevin. Kevin, the question is, you're born in the USA. How on earth do you say, I'm a Liverpool fan?
Yeah. No, it's fascinating because I think with a lot of Americans, it's either two things. So, you know, it could be something where it's the first team that you see. Like for me, you know, I fell in love with soccer after the 1990 World Cup. That was the first time I had the chance to see soccer played at a professional level. So I fell in love with that tournament. That summer, that's all I did. I rewatched those games. I taped games. I would rewatch them. I mean, my parents' VCR probably got destroyed, just the amount of times I watched games. The next time I saw soccer on TV, ironically, it happened to be Man City and Liverpool. And this must have been 91, 92. I still remember this vividly. I was on vacation with my family. We were in Hilton Head. And I should also mention that where we grew up in Ohio, we didn't have cable because it was a rural part of Ohio. So seeing anything like this on TV, I was just like, oh my God, okay, this is it. So I'm watching, and I still remember the game. It ended, I think it was a 2-2 draw. Dean Saunders scored it kind of towards the end of the game, and I thought, okay, well, they're going to the penalty case. It's going to be a shootout, because that's what I had known from the only other soccer I'd watched, Italia 90. And so it ended in a draw, and I was really confused. There was a lot I was still learning about the game. So again, this was 92. Liverpool was just obviously 70s and 80s. They were a big team. So they were one of the, and then with everything else that happened with Liverpool, anytime you got coverage in the States, sometimes, the majority of the time, it's because something happened that wasn't good. So I knew about Liverpool. I had no idea about City because they're a tiny club up until recently. And so then I just kind of decided, okay, this is my team. Liverpool's going to be my team. And that was, must have been 6th grade, so I don't know, 12 years old. And then, you know, here I am now still supporting the club.
It's amazing what coffee can do. I can tell you we're at the Coffee Emporium downtown in Cincinnati. But though he has all this knowledge, he also played the game. You played the game at college level.
I did, yeah. So I played the game until they asked me to stop. So they asked me to stop because...
Can we say stop, or were you cut?
They asked me to stop. I'm not going to say how they asked me to stop. Yeah, they said maybe you're better watching the team as opposed to... Yeah, no, so I played my freshman year, small school, Division III school, did my knee, and at the same time I was cut from the team. So it was a very tough year.
Yeah.
It was challenging.
Yeah. Now, let's sort of go forward here. You guys invited me to see the Liverpool fan club, which is an official fan club, by the way, crowded, loud. And one of the reasons is that we sort of went to the coffee shop is because we now can hear our voices. However, I was concerned with the Liverpool side, a little lethargic in the first 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Then came back, tied it 2-2. Were you satisfied with that result?
No. I mean, especially the first game of the season against a side like Fulham. I mean, you don't take anything for granted, but you know, on paper, and that's kind of, the challenge has been in the years prior, you know, you look at those years, especially when you have competition like City, and that's the interesting thing about the Prem. You cannot lose any games. You can't drop any points. And I felt like these were 2 points that were dropped. Thank God we got away with it, came out of there with one.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely started off slow. First 10 minutes, it didn't look like, you know, Liverpool. I think there's still some things to sort. Not happy with the result, but at the same time, it totally hasn't ruined my weekend.
Mm-hmm. And if we step back, it's just recently that Liverpool in the Charity Shield beat Manchester City.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, you know, the past couple of years, you've had these two, you know, teams that have always gotten, you know, neck and neck. And that is kind of the, you know, if you ask me who's going to finish first, who's going to finish second, Man City, Liverpool, Man City. I don't know which way it's going to go. Hopefully it's Liverpool, Man City, but I definitely expect the two of them to be in the top two.
I know Kevin and I had a discussion about who I support. Well, I was brought up in Leeds, so we had Leeds United in Yorkshire. So it's been 16, 17 years since we've had a decent team, and of course we survived the relegation last season.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's been, I mean, The thing that's I think is interesting about just soccer in general, not just in Cincinnati, but in the States, is you have these clubs and these players, these people that support these teams, that because for a while it was just you would have maybe the 4 or 5 big clubs in England. But I was in the bar earlier, Rhinehouse earlier, talking to somebody, and he was a Leeds supporter. Introduced himself. We said hello, and I asked, well, how did you start supporting the Leeds? And he was like, well, I watched them last year, or watching them in Championship, and they're just the games are so much more accessible now.
Yes.
So it's not so much just like the top 4. That top 4 hasn't existed for years, but now you have all of these other people that are supporting these teams from a smaller, maybe a couple of divisions down, coming up, and it makes for a fantastic. As a fan, watching someplace in a common space with a bunch of other people, you have multiple games on. It's fantastic. It's a blast.
I'm going to ask you a pretty loaded question because I had to get permission in Canada through the Canadian Soccer Association, and I believe they had to backtrack it. I wanted to interview, and I did interview, the chief guy that looks after refereeing. I hate to say this, there's not going to be one representative at this stage at the FIFA World Cup in November. However, the women in the Philippines has made the World Cup in 2023. It's going to be divided between Australia and New Zealand. However, let me ask you this. What's your opinion on VAR?
I do not like VAR. I have not liked it. So part of me, I'm a romantic. And part of me, I like the idea that you can play this same sport every other country of the world, every other league, and it's the same. And then you add the technology, and then that changes things. Because now some leagues have an advantage, some calls are being looked at. I don't like that aspect of the game. I also don't like how it slows the game down. I don't like how now, growing up, I always heard soccer, the reason that Americans didn't like soccer because it wasn't exciting enough. There wasn't enough scoring. And now it seems like, the sport penalizing the attacker, and they're giving the advantage to the defender.
Yes.
I don't like how it takes the emotion out. You celebrate a goal, they're checking for VAR, you have to scale it back, and then you're like, okay, great, they scored. They the VAR pass it. I'm not crazy about it. I think there's a lot of opportunities to improve the system.
Well, there you got it, folks. My opinion on it doesn't count, but it certainly does with Kevin. It was great that we met up with Kevin in a very noisy bar downtown Cincinnati. Great game. I mean, yes, Liverpool tied it 2-2, but the season's only just begun. I'm Peter Irvine, your host. For the love of the game, of course, I always say this, covering Philippine football and international news. Well, as I mentioned with Kevin, we had a great time watching the Liverpool against Fulham game. Another colleague of ours there is Matt. Now, Matt, obviously, I know you and I were talking. You were disappointed with the result.
For sure. I was definitely hoping to see Liverpool come out a little cleaner than what they did. They're notorious for basically their pressing, their high intensity, and there was a lot of waiting, it seemed like. That's one of the things I kind of noticed. But first game of the season, some new cogs in the machine, and there's some growing pains with it. But Fulham's also a scrappy team. I was talking about before the game. Mitrovic is a guy that I always worry about. He is definitely a Premier League caliber forward, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's not flashy, but he does every job right. So someone like that, hungry, playing against Liverpool, playing against top team, you're walking into a trap sometimes. And I think that sort of sluggishness, first game growing pains meets a hungry team. 1 point is hard to deal with, but at the same time, I'm kind of happy with it because it could have easily been a 2-1 kind of game. That penalty could have been 2-0, but
Well,
I'm happy they came back.
That's a good bonus, isn't it, for Fulham?
For sure.
I mean, 2-2. Mm-hmm. Not bad at all.
No.
What's your opinion on the amount of warm-up games that these national teams, but in a way it is national, these teams like Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea on tour, are there too many warm-up games?
I do think a big part of it is PR, getting the teams out to the world, letting people see them. Because again, too, living in the U.S., being a Liverpool fan, for example, you don't get a lot of exposure to them. So getting those U.S. tours, getting those international tours, they go and they play, that is great for building the brand, building the name, giving fans a chance to experience the team. Do I think when you look at the length of a season, the length of international games, et cetera, do I think that piles on? Absolutely. No doubt. I do think it is something that a lot of sports face. I mean, you need the tune-up games, you need that experience, but at the same time, how much is too much?
Now,
that comes across.
Liverpool sold some players and they've bought some players. And one player comes to mind is this young kid played with Fulham last season and did well to get Fulham back.
Of course.
Is he going to be sat on the bench?
You would hope not, but at the same time, Klopp's system does seem to be bring players in and hold off until they're ready, which I do appreciate. He doesn't just throw them in. It's not a meat grinder. It's not trial by fire. He makes sure they're ready for the system. When they're ready, he goes. And so far, his choices have worked out pretty well, in my opinion. So
Right.
I have faith. I have faith in the system as far as Klopp goes. So
Okay.
try to go in, like you said, seeing a team come out of the championship, making a big cash splash on someone, snatching it the way they did. Clearly, to me, there's something that he saw, and so far, as I said, Andy Robertson's worked out, Virgil van Dijk has worked out. There's been some good eyes where people were like, I don't know if that player will fit the system, and then they've been one of the most key parts of that system. So I'm kind of
course.
hopeful that that's what we'll look at soon.
Okay, folks, the $1 million question. I will take this hat off because what does it say there? You can't tell. But if you turn it around, it says England. What's England's chances in the World Cup?
One thing that gives me more hope for England nowadays is there's less club rivalry. It seems a lot of the players, when they show up for the national team, they are a little more cohesive than they used to be because, again, too, it was that sort of golden generation, Gerrard, Lampard, et cetera. Why were they not winning? And honestly, I think that club rivalry trumped national team support. It's interesting now. It seems like these teams are actually more cohesive. I think they do have a fair shot. There's some other pretty good teams out there, but I do think that the cohesiveness gives them a better shot than what they've seen in the past, even though maybe the talent isn't that A++ caliber.
Yes.
I think they still have, if the right team shows up, it gives you a better chance. And I think that's one of their best assets now.
That's where you put your bet. Now, I'm from Canada as well. The odds are 10-1 that Canada will not score a goal. I don't believe that. However, Matt, it was a pleasure talking to you and Kevin there. And I've got to come back to Cincinnati because the bar we were in, give me the name of the bar so I don't score.
Rhinehouse.
Okay. So as the Liverpool game was finished, they were showing Tottenham. And as Tottenham was playing, they were showing Aston Villa. I mean, boy, what a wealth of games there. And of course, I'm Peter Irvine, your host, for the love of the game, of course. And I am still covering Philippine football and international news, and we'll be traveling back to the Philippines pretty shortly.